been thinking about this a lot lately, and I don't know if witches should be their own race or heritage, or if they just need more class definition. Because witches fall very nicely into wizards, or alchemists, or druids, or even warlocks. That's a lot of different classes. And I think that's where I'm coming from. Witches don't really fit nicely into just one category. Because there's really only 3 things you need to be a witch. A big hat, a familiar, and a broom. And wizards have all of these in spades. Hat, done. Familiar, in book or owl form. And brooms, well, they're just staffs, but they forgot to put the bristles on it. So while wizards work really well, I think they're missing out on some very important things that make witches witches. So if you want to play a witch in D&D, that sounds like a very reasonable thing to ask. But no, there's no witches in D&D. You might be thinking, well, what about that one fancy lady on the cover of the book with her own name on it? No, canonically she's an archmage, which is also not a class, but apparently neither is a witch. Which also brings up the question, what is a mage? Because while she's labeled as an archmage, she is classically a wizard. Alternatively, some would argue that wizards are male and witches are female, which I could see the argument for if they weren't using the gendered language wrong. The magically inclined would be known as witches and warlocks, not wizards at all. You could even go as far as saying that wizards is a title bestowed on classically trained practitioners of magic, and then witch might be more of a honorable title that is achieved by mastery of magic, but not through academic accreditation, which would open up a whole big thing for male witches and female wizards, which makes a whole lot more sense to me anyways. But what does any of this have to do with Dungeons & Dragons? Honestly, nothing. Wizards of the Coast just write whatever they want and words don't mean anything, so who knows? But if you do want to play a witch in Dungeons & Dragons, you could just lean really heavily into the witch class from Pathfinder 2e, which has a lot more focus on their familiars, so I think there's some good starting points there. If you do want to build it in 5e though, you basically have 3 things to look at. The book, the familiar, and the hat and the broom. Wait, that last 2 things, 2 things. Yes, thank you, I'm aware. But I'm talking about the witch's kit or equipment. So it's like more than 2 things? Listen, it's just easier to talk about if we clump it all into one big thing. So it's 3 things. Sure. Part 1, your spellbook. I do think this is the one reason you should start as a wizard for being a witch. The wizard spellbook works pretty well right out of the gate, and it can be adapted in quite a few different ways. It's really great for pretty much all witches being the core of their magic, but I'm less impressed with the way that it actually flavorfully works out. To me, the spellbook for the witch should really work one of 2 ways, either more like the Pact of the Tome Warlock or a familiar, and I might need to explain that. Following the Pact of the Tome, it grants you an expanded spell list, and maybe some unique castings of bigger spells or rituals. This should, however, be more of an acquired item than something that was the core of the witch's learning. And that's why Pact of the Tome makes more sense, because this is extra knowledge that you're gaining beyond your normal skills in magic. And now the other side of that is that your spellbook could be your familiar. There are tons of sentient books and sentient magical items. There's no reason that this thing couldn't be the thing that grants you magic because it knows the magic. Isn't that how normal spellbooks work? Yeah, I suppose so, but at some point, you're going to have to ask permission to cast a fireball, and that's just going to be awkward. Fair point. Part 2, the familiar. If for some reason you don't want to treat your spellbook like a familiar, you should have Find Familiar as a free spell that you can cast once per day. And then any known or prepared spells that you would normally hold in a spellbook, you would just hold within this strange creature. Wait, am I full of spells? Rugby, you're an assistant, not a familiar. Are you sure? Because it feels like I'm full of spells right now. I'm positive. What if I'm so full of spells you just can't tell? You're definitely full of something. I would argue that this is a unique casting of Find Familiar, and because it is more of a spirit animal than it is a summoned creature, it should really be attuned to the witch. So instead of switching it back and forth between different shapes whenever you feel like it, it should really be one static type of creature. Any new spells or cantrips you want to learn, you would learn the normal way, but you teach them to the familiar itself. Go on. Have I taught you the cantrip Get Back to Work or You're Fired? Yes. Pathfinder does this really well by having the familiar be both a conduit and a focus for spellcasting, which if you want to deliver some of your sweet hexes and curses via Plague Rat, I say go for it. And whether you choose the book or a normal familiar for your familiar, it should really be tied to the type of magic you want to cast too. If you want to be more druidic, you can have a nature spirit. For arcane magic, you can have an elemental. Or if you want something more occult, you might as well have an actual spirit or ghost. There should really be a lot of flexibility. You can pick something that fits those aesthetics. Whichever way you choose, I feel like it should be focused around enchantment, Matt. Taking the enchantment subclass at level 3 is not a bad way to go, but even in Pathfinder, there's really no reason not to be able to focus on other schools of magic. I would allow both the spellbook and the familiar as your casting book and focus, with the intent that, yes, you get free familiars, but they are required for any spell casting beyond your cantrips. And this is a note to the DMs out there. If you want to give your players an expanded spell list via the bonus spell tome, you can balance this out by removing the arcane recovery. It works out about the same. You're basically trading extra spell slots for spell flexibility. And if they complain about it, just give them a few extra casts of spells from the tome. Nobody turns down free spell slot. Witches should really be all about storing spells outside of their body, whether it's in a book or a cauldron or in a cat. And hell, throwing toads at people should always be an acceptable form of magic. Part 3, the hat and the broom. and the books and the weird shoes. You can really be anything. A wand, a staff, a house made out of gingerbread. It's just all about infusing magic into items. I mean, the hat is kind of required, but I'm not sure if that's actually a wizard thing. I mean, it worked for Gandalf, so maybe it is just an obligatory magical object, but there's no way you can't have some fun stuff hidden inside the hat. Pathfinder witches use a lot of hex-based focus spells. The closest thing in D&D to a focus spell is really essentially like a wand or a staff. Basically magical items that are limited numbers of uses per day. Because your spellcasting is focused more around items and essences from the world around you, it only makes sense that the gear you wear should reflect this. Every item a witch has should be either a spell focus, a charm, or a meta magic item. And your DM can look over the witch's hex list and just make some of them into wands or items that you can equip and use as you level up. Just use them all as a standard action. This is what I feel like the D&D witch is missing the most. A hat? No, well, yes. Bits and baubles that hold magical power. Things that not just allow them to focus on their magic, but imbue things with their hexes and curses. It might be a little dated, but I love the idea of the iconic witch handing someone a poisoned apple. And if you really want to go down the alchemist or artificer path, there are some really fun feats for Pathfinder that allow you to do that. Something like the ceremonial knife feat, which allows you to use items like knives or swords as magical wands. Whereas with alchemy, you could take the School of Transmutation subclass as a wizard, or you could just take the Cauldron Witch feat from Pathfinder, and that gives you the ability to just have proficiency with alchemy and alchemical tools. But regardless of how you deliver these spells, I think enchantments should still be the main focus for most witches. And so it's going to be really important to expand your spell list using hexes and curses that you can take right from the witch's hex list from Pathfinder 2nd edition. And choosing which ones you take can really fine-tune what kind of witch you are. Because hexes and curses don't have to be bad. Life Boon, for example, curses somebody with fast healing for a few rounds. Scourge's Glee lets you frighten people with your smile. That's pretty great. And you can never go wrong using Evil Eye. So long as you're looking at somebody, it makes them sick.
Wait, shouldn't that be the other way around?
Yeah, maybe for you. What? If you're going to be playing D&D, I would highly suggest starting as a warlock and then multi-classing into another class that would give you the divine, arcane, or occult spell list that you want to use. And then you can just use your curses in place of your hexes or hunter's mark. You can just pick one from the Pathfinder list or let your DM approve a couple of them and just swap them out. And they work pretty well. In Pathfinder, these are meant to be usable every fight and they refresh with the equivalent of a short rest. And if you're playing Pathfinder, just be a witch. It's fun. Spells are cast through objects and creatures and magical essences, yada, yada, yada. Wear a big hat. And something about the size of your broom handle. I don't know. Witches are flavorful characters, whether you want them to be hags or fae-inspired, tieflings, or just normal people who don't want to ruin their lives with student loans.
Looking at you, Hogwarts. Not all of our parents can be dentists.
Just get out there, play a sexy swamp witch, and remember to keep your dice on the table, everybody.
Happy Halloween! Wait, should we be giving them candy?
I didn't buy any candy.
What have I been eating for the last 20 minutes?